unceded and unsurrendered traditional homelands of the O'odham, Peepash, Yavapai, and all the descendants of the Huhugam people. We recognize the ancestors and invest in the present day and future descendants. The majority of us, sorry, that is life. I'm sorry about that. The majority of us are settlers on this land, and we have a responsibility to actively bring action to this true history, participate in reconciliation, as well as engage one another in an open discussion on how to move forward and do right by the original peoples. I want to, every time I read that, it makes my heart so happy and also so sad, so please forgive me. I want to pass it along now to Jennifer Tunning, who is a member of the People Over Property Initiative and sits on the South Mountain Village Planning Committee. She will be helping us ground ourselves in the values and the framework of the People Over Property Initiative. So Jennifer, mic is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Zoraida. So I have the privilege tonight of representing both the South Mountain Village Planning Committee as well as the People Over Property Initiative. So if you're not familiar, if you haven't attended an event with People Over Property or the Poppy Initiative before, the initiative is a collective of local organizations, community organizers, community developers, village planning committee members, and residents and lovers of our South Phoenix community. We recognize the generational impact of a land use and development process by a city built on racial segregation and exploitation. As we continue to face systemic racism in development today, we are guided by the following values. So we center those most directly impacted by health disparity. The legacy of racism has resulted in state-sanctioned early death of South Phoenix residents through food apartheid, mass incarceration and criminalization, and environmental racism. We center Black liberation and make visible the way racism operates in the development process. In solidarity, we hold a commitment to name anti-Black violence and move towards dismantling the beliefs behind it, which are racial, economic, and gender-based. We center healing and transformation in our recommendations, requests, considerations, and expectations for future development. And to help continue to ground us in our values tonight, we're going to show a little bit of video that expands on that. So that'll help introduce our understanding of racialized displacement and gentrification in the city of Phoenix through the framework of resegregation. And our fantastic own Ria is going to play that video now.
Thank you, Jennifer. Can you let me know if you can hear this with a thumbs up? Yes? No? Nope. Okay, this should work now.
Mass Liberation Arizona presents Resegregation in the City. In a 2018 segment on KJZZ discussing how rare it is to be an Arizona native, 60% of residents in 2017 were reported to have been born out of state according to the American Community Survey. This makes Arizona a top 5 commuter state, following Nevada, Florida, and Washington, D.C. Where are most people moving from? According to the U.S. Census, California. And while this pattern of migration to the Phoenix metropolitan area makes sense when you consider that the Valley has long been considered one of the most affordable places to live in the West, a steadily rising gap between income and housing rates has set off alarms about what affordability really means for its residents. Cheap housing has disappeared, replaced by high-priced rentals that don't seem to fit into the landscape. In a 2019 article from the Arizona Republic on the looming affordable housing crisis, the median home price in Phoenix was reported to have grown by 44% since 2013, while the median household income only increased by 12%. And the result of this disparity in income and housing rates? Maricopa County Justice Courts saw more than 25,000 eviction orders in 2017 alone, the 5th highest total in county history, and a 12% increase from 2016. Nowhere was the increase worse than in the Country Meadows Justice Precinct, which spreads across high-poverty chunks of Glendale and West Phoenix. When rents reach the tipping point, when old industrial buildings flip or are raised for flimsy new ones made of glass and chipboard, when the once affordable housing is renovated into high-end duplexes, when poor residents have to leave, the gentrification narrative hits its limit. Gentrification has no room for the question, Where did the displaced go? Resegregation tells a more complete story by addressing race and answering where the evicted, the foreclosed, the unwelcomed, where the displaced go. As the inner city gentrifies, poor black and brown people are relegated to the inner and outer suburbs, like Levine, Buckeye, and Maricopa. They face premature death through homelessness, health disparities, and police violence. And they are caged in prisons, jails, and detention centers. Each disparity falls on racial lines, alluding to the structural racism that has driven land use and development since the founding of Phoenix.
You're not muted.
I was muted. Thank you for that, Ria. Yeah, Jennifer, you want to talk about the slides that are coming up, or did we just do that?
Yeah, I think we're good there. If you want to kind of recenter us and ground in maybe some of the other events that have been going on.
Sure. So yeah, thank you for that. And we have a lot of folks here who have already been through our resegregation community dialogue events on city development, light rail, and evictions. So this video on the concept of resegregation is one that you already may have encountered or know already. But here's a little background. Why are we here today to watch this random meeting? Because they're so exciting all the time, right? To answer that question and learn more about what the committee itself is we're going to enlist Jennifer's help, who has loads of experience in the culture and the dynamics of this space, and help us navigate it. If you have any questions at all for the participants, please pop them in the chat. Ria is going to be monitoring the chat and making sure that we get your voice heard. But I'm going to ask Jennifer, if it's okay with you, just a couple of questions. Do you feel ready, or did I put you on the spot?
I'm so ready.
Let's go, girl. All right, so what is the South Central Transit Oriented Development Committee? What is that?
Yeah, so kind of a loaded question, but why essentially City of Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the entire country. So that essentially means that the idea that 8 city council people could make the best local decisions for entire community and literally millions of people would be near impossible. So what the city has done is they've broken the city into 15 villages. And then on top of that has also created ad hoc committees depending on different agenda items or new development that the city wants to bring in. So the South Central Transit Oriented Development Committee was created when the South Central Light Rail was announced and the extension coming through South Phoenix. So what it is it's folks that have been appointed by the mayor, because it's an ad hoc committee, to discuss. They identify 2 areas, the transit-oriented development and business, which are important for us to keep in mind here. So essentially it was to involve community stakeholders. So it's supposed to be folks from local organizing, organizations, businesses, spiritual groups. And we'll see a little bit tonight that some of that doesn't always come to fruition because of both the appointments and the way that these spaces are navigated. Looks like from Joe, we're starting to see agenda item number 4 come up, which is where we're going to start our meeting tonight. And after agenda item number 4, we'll come back and regroup a little bit, unpack what we heard, and maybe answer some more questions about how this committee works and what we're seeing in this space.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Joe, for the heads up. And Ria, if you could get us streamed.
Our mission is to advance environmental protection and sustainability by promoting sound environmental policies and practices. There are 10 staff in our office with our primary focus on compliance with environmental laws and regulations for our own city operations and facilities.
So to give just a crumb of context to this, so right now we're hearing agenda item number 4 for the South Central Transit Oriented Development Committee. This is the Office of Environmental Programs. It sounds like Rosanna Albright is the one
the National
speaking right now. So she's going to give a PowerPoint on
the light rail
in regards
project,
to this
as
agenda
our
item
OT
and
staff
specifically
is
South
reviewing
Phoenix.
environmental assessment work that's being done for construction of the light rail. We have a
While you're
404
watching
and
this-
natural resources section that focuses on compliance
While
with
you're
the Clean
watching
Water
this, let
Act,
us know what ways are people
stormwater
being
as well.
before,
And
property
we
being
also
put
have
before
programs
people.
that
Just
are
listen to
targeted
what they're
more
saying
towards
and see what that
assistance to
actually
the
means.
private sector,
Drop it in the chat,
business,
please.
nonprofits, and the community, such as the work we do in our brownfields redevelopment program, our food systems work, and air quality, which you're going to learn more about today. We're also leading the effort to develop a community-scale climate action plan in partnership with the Office of Sustainability, all city departments, and with you, the community. We learned from Elias and the planning team that there were many questions about air quality and related to air quality. So this evening, we'll answer those questions about the current status of air quality in the focus area that you all are working in and share other relevant information. This evening, we won't be able to answer the questions that relate to flight paths and health impacts, as we feel it is more appropriate to bring in those experts that can present the most current data and be able to answer your questions most accurately. So I hope you agree with that approach. Although we wouldn't mind bending your ears for the full 2 hours about air quality, all the technical nuances, and bring out the inner nerd in each of you, we know you've got a lot of other business to consider this evening. So think of today as the beginning of a relationship where we can learn together and work together. Next slide, please. So speaking to you today will be Dr. Matthew Potzler, who is Air Quality and Climate Specialist with the Office of Environmental Programs. He'll share an overview of the Clean Air Act, which is the regulatory driver for everything that's done. He'll share information about regional efforts, because I'm sure you recognize air quality is affected by what is happening in our entire region, sometimes even affected by what's happening in nearby states, like what we saw with the wildfires in California and the impacts it brought to our air this summer. And lastly, he'll share activities that the City of Phoenix has done and continues to do. He'll be followed by Dr. Ron Pope, who is an atmospheric scientist with the Maricopa County Air Quality Department, who will present current data on the status of air quality in Phoenix and specifically in the South Central Phoenix area. We'll finish up with brief information about the climate action plan that the city is preparing. This presentation is really timely because air quality is one of the focus sectors in that climate action plan, and it's a great opportunity for you to provide your input on this topic as well. You've got such a packed agenda. I'd like to ask that we do questions at the end. So if you've got a question as we're presenting, jot it down and we'll respond at the end of the presentation on time. Thank you so much. So Matthew, take it away.
Thank you, Roseanne, Madam Chair and committee members. And before I begin, could I actually request that Dr. Ron Pope be added as a panelist, please?
He has been added.
Okay, thank you. So the Clean Air Act is a framework for the federal, state, and local efforts in protecting air quality. The version that we're used now was established in 1970, and it regulates air emissions from mobile sources. That would be vehicles like you see on the screen. So that would be motor vehicles, trucks, cars, and also things like construction equipment. The Clean Air Act also regulates emissions from stationary sources. So that would be power plants, businesses, and industry. And so on the screen, you will also see at the bottom some websites. So this is, again, a very brief overview. And if you want more details, you can follow those links below. One of the things that the Clean Air Act established was national ambient air quality standards. And so these are health-based standards that must be attained to be in line with the law. And so the 6 criteria air pollutants that you can see on your screen are carbon monoxide, lead, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide, and ground level ozone. And the ones we'll cover today are those highlighted in yellow, so particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide, and ground level ozone. And again, just a reminder that these are health-based standards. They're based on how much of these can be in the air before air quality is low and then impacts human health. So first we'll start with the particulate matter. So the key with this is the smaller the particle, the higher the risk to human health. And that's because as it gets smaller and smaller, it can penetrate deeper into your lungs. And if it's small enough, it can actually go directly to your bloodstream. So on your screen, there's an image of a human hair follicle. And so you can see that it is about 50 microns in diameter. And so the two sizes that are more concerning in regards to particulate matter are those that are 10 microns in diameter or smaller. So they're very small particles. So these would be dust or pollen or mold. And the Phoenix area, most of this comes from, most of it's dust, and most of it comes from paved surfaces and unpaved surfaces. So as you're driving your vehicles over pavement, some of that dirt gets kicked up into the air, and then we breathe it in. The other size is PM 2.5. So these are particulate matter that's 2.5 microns in diameter or smaller. And so these primarily come from combustion, so from fire, from automobile tailpipes. And so those are the smaller ones that are more worrisome in regards to reaching your bloodstream. The next class of compounds we'll talk about is ozone. And so two of the criteria air pollutants are nitrogen dioxide and ozone. And so to form ozone, you need sun, you need the nitrogen oxide. So those will come from combustion in either automobiles or coal-fired power plants. And those will react with volatile organic compounds. So in this area, most of it comes from trees or vegetation. Some of it also comes from solvents or paints, or also like fuels. So when you're filling up your car, you'll notice that sweet smell. So that's volatile organic compounds. And then those react and produce ozone. And so that is, again, hazardous to human health. And so currently, the Phoenix area, again, this is a regional issue. So on your screen, there's a map that shows the different PM10 non-attainment, or the non-attainment areas for PM10 and ozone. And so you can see that the PM10 is a red box that kind of circles the whole metropolitan area, along with a larger area for the ozone non-attainment. And so for more information, again, you can go to those websites below. And so what happens if the area or that region doesn't meet those standards that are set? So over time, the consequences escalate. And so in this case, they escalate in terms of more regulatory burden, more economic burden. So as the quality of the air doesn't get better, you have to put more control measures. And so this is usually on industry because they're the ones producing those emissions. And so you can see that after some time, those the economic burden or the amount of money it costs to put in these control measures increases. At some point, it doesn't become economically viable to come to the region. And so that'll stop emissions from increasing. But again, it doesn't help anyone if jobs stop coming. It doesn't help anyone if the air quality continues to be bad. So it's in everyone's best interest for air quality to increase over time. And so in addition to like their regulatory responsibilities, the different groups have, the different agencies and planning agencies and regulatory agencies have different groups to address air quality. And so Maricopa County Air Quality Department has Clean Air Council. So that's a group of industry, businesses, municipalities, utilities, and they discuss air quality and how it can be improved in the region. For the Maricopa Associative Government, so that's the planning agency for the region. And so they have an air technical committee. So they make recommendations to improve air quality. And then we have at the state level, the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality has an air quality ozone coalition. So it's specifically tasked with improving air quality in regards to ozone. And so now that we've kind of seen like the regional motivators, now we can see how the Clean Air Act dictates the actions that happen on the ground. So for City of Phoenix, a lot of control practices are surrounding dust. So about 10 years ago, there was a significant particulate matter 10 issue. And so part of the plan is to reduce those emissions. And so one of the activities that was undertaken was to stabilize over 500 miles of alleyways. So when garbage trucks or service vehicles are driving by homes, those areas are now stabilized, so less dust is produced. In addition to that, there's a network of street sweepers. So they go around sweeping the streets to make sure they pick up that dust before your vehicle does. And that way it reduces the amount of PM10 floating in the air. In addition to that, codes and ordinances were added to the city. And so now you can have dust violations. So there's inspectors that are trained to look for dust and make sure that we can educate the different neighborhoods. In this case, neighborhood services can educate and kind of show how to eliminate PM10. And so one of the concerns throughout this whole time period is we're just paving over everything to limit dust. Now we're creating urban heat island. And so there's a new cool pavement pilot project where instead of using the traditional sealant, we use this lighter colored sealant, and it's being piloted across the city. So various neighborhoods, various districts in each of the districts. And the goal is to reduce the urban heat island effect. And so this is one of those actions that are being undertaken as part of the climate action plan that Rosanna will discuss later. In addition to that, we modify activities on high pollution advisory days. So on the website Clean Air Make More from the Maricopa County Air Quality Department, you can sign up for alerts. So it'll let you know what air quality is for that day. So on your screen, there should be a blue box now. You can see air quality, and then it can tell you if there's restrictions on the kind of activities you can be performing that day. So if there are, and if this happens, typically the City of Phoenix employees will get those alerts, and then we'll reschedule those activities to prevent things like dust formation. And then to prevent other kinds of pollution, we encourage alternative modes of travel. So today we're talking about the light rail expansion. So public transit, carpooling, van pooling, and telecommuting all help to decrease air pollutants from being emitted. So that includes the things like the nitrogen oxide or ozone. And part of this is for the plan of the Transportation 2050. And in addition to that, the city operations is transitioning to the use of alternative fuels like biodiesel or compressed natural gas. And so by using these alternative fuels, you can still get services like public transit, like the bus, but then you actually reduce emissions per mile. And so that leads us to the light rail. So these are just a couple tidbits. So the light rail per day reduces 12 tons of airborne emissions. And so since it's a regional issue and air doesn't really stay confined in one area, that 12 tons is across Phoenix and Pia Mesa. And then just another tidbit is for every 70 miles that you don't travel by car, you save a pound of pollution. So another benefit of the light rail is that it's powered by electricity that has lower emissions than other fuels that are traditionally used like gasoline or diesel. And there's no tailpipes on the light rail cars. So that'll improve local air quality. And so now to talk about air quality monitoring in the city of Phoenix is Dr. Ron Pope. He's an atmospheric science from the Maricopa County Air Quality Department. Dr. Pope conducts research on air pollution. He analyzes and forecasts pollution trends and mitigation strategies. And he also collects and analyzes data from the Air Pollution Monitoring Network. And so that's the kind of data that he'll be presenting today. And then he'll also be talking about programs to increase air quality and how you can participate in those efforts. So Ron Pope, Dr. Ron Pope.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. Make sure that you can all hear me.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's my pleasure here to talk about Maricopa County's monitoring network and the data that we collect. If we could go to the next slide, please. So Maricopa County operates a air monitoring network of 23 sites within the county borders. Within the city of Phoenix itself, which on the slide there, the highlighted area, of course, is the city limits. There are 8 sites operating, and 7 of those are operated by my department, Maricopa County, and then we also have 1 site, the JLG super site, is operated by the ADEQ. Now, surrounding the city and throughout the county, besides our department, there are tribal organizations that operate air monitors. The state has another site, within the non-attainment areas. And then if we go outside of the county in the non-attainment areas, Pinal County also has sites. So we have a lot of different sources of data to look at air monitoring data. But I'm just going to focus on the sites that are there within Phoenix. Now, within all the sites within Phoenix here, all the different criteria air pollutants are measured, which were mentioned in the presentation there. There's carbon monoxide, lead, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, particulate matter, and sulfur dioxide. Now, each one of these criteria pollutants are not necessarily measured at each site. Some sites, like the JLG super site run by the ADEQ, does have everything. In fact, that's why it's a super site. It monitors everything there. Other sites are selected based upon sources in the area and how we plan and develop our monitoring network. Some of the older sites, like Central Phoenix, is our oldest site. It's been there since the early 1960s. and it does have quite a few parameters there. Some of the other sites that are on that have been around for quite a while that also have several parameters that we measure there include West Phoenix, North Phoenix, and South Phoenix. These sites are all long-term sites. We've had them for quite a while. But I'm going to focus on South Phoenix here a little bit and talk about that site. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the South Phoenix site, and I'm focusing on this because it's right there in the middle of that, that South Phoenix corridor. It's located on, near Broadway and Central. There's a public health facility right there. And the site, which the picture there demonstrates it, is located right there next to the facility. Now, this site's been operating for 46 years. It first opened up in 1974, although it was at a different location, just a very short distance away when it first opened. So if you're pulling data for this site, keep in mind that when it moved in 1999 because of construction, and the ID number for pulling data changed. But it is essentially the same site that has been operating there for 46 years. Now, at this site, we measure 4 air pollutants that Maricopa County does: carbon monoxide, ozone, and particulate matter. And we do both the PM10, that's the particulate matter that's mainly consists of dust here in Maricopa County, and then PM 2.5, that's the fine particulate matter that comes from smoke and in vehicle exhaust for the most part here. Now, also monitored at this site is the ADEQ has their national air toxics site there. So they do measure various volatile organic compounds there, as a secondary site to the super site. So the super site and the South Phoenix site are both doing the air toxics program here. So this is a pretty important site, has a lot of data and information and history behind it. If we could go to the next slide, please. Now, kind of focusing in here, and on the map there, I've highlighted this South Central area, and you can see that South Phoenix is right there in the middle of it there near Broadway and Central. But there's several other nearby sites here. And in the table there, I wanted to list all the Phoenix sites and kind of compare what the pollution values are at them. Now, I took what we call the design value. This is a 3-year average. These are the pollution concentrations that we compare to those health standards, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And I took the values that we have and I actually converted them to an air quality index. So an air quality index is it's a unitless value that it's used to communicate pollution values. And you can see there at the bottom of the chart, that little dial shows the different colors. And 0 to 50 AQI is in the good range. When you go from 50 to 100, you're in a moderate. Once you've exceeded an AQI of 100, you've exceeded the health standard. And the first part of that is we call it unhealthy for sensitive groups. And in that range, people that are exceptionally sensitive to air pollutants, or people that have respiratory disease, or the elderly and so forth, they could start to experience symptoms from exposure at that level. Once we get above 150, now air quality moves into the unhealthy range, and then so forth, going all the way up to hazardous range, maxing out at 500. Now, looking at the different sites there, I wanted to point out how South Phoenix compares to other sites around the area, and then maybe talk a little bit about why. So as you can see, when you're looking at carbon monoxide, the CO, the first category there, it's universally low across all the sites in Phoenix that are measuring that pollutant. They're all in the good range. This has been common for quite some time now. Cars are much cleaner. We had a lot of problems with carbon monoxide back in the 80s and 90s, but there has been no problems here for the last 20 years or so. That pollutant has been quite low, and it stays in the good range. Now, a problem that we have across the region, across the Maricopa County as a whole, is ozone. This is a problem. This is a pollutant that we put a lot of attention on. It's a regional pollutant. It spreads out wide. And as you can see, every one of the sites in Phoenix that monitor that are exceeding the health standards. We all are in non-attainment of ozone. Now, the values are all pretty close there. South Phoenix is actually the lowest one there, but these values are all pretty close to each other. North Phoenix comes in a little bit higher. A lot of this is wind patterns where, you know, the way the wind moves across the valley, it kind of pools some of the ozone there in the North Phoenix area. That's why you see slightly higher values there. But these are all comparable values for ozone, which is what we expect with a regional pollutant like that. Now, PM10, which is usually considered the dust pollutant, as you can see, it is pretty much, it's in the moderate range for many sites in Phoenix. There's 2 sites that are exceeding the standard this year. Or actually, this is 2019 data. So there's 2 sites there that are exceeding, and that would be Central Phoenix and West 43rd. Now, one thing I did here is when we're looking at PM10 data, the values that we compare to the regulations, we have exceptional events. So the big dust storms that come in are considered exceptional events, and they exceed our capacity to control emissions. And so if the EPA approves those exceptional events, we can take those days out of the mix. The values you're seeing here are including those days. These are the actual values with exceptional events included. Once we take the exceptional events out, we are meeting the health standards at all of our sites. But with the dust storms included, you can see that it is in the high moderates in most of the places, and including 2 places that exceed those standards. Now, once again, South Phoenix is one of the lower sites here. It's not the lowest. North Phoenix is the lowest, but it's on the lower side for in comparison. The sites that are higher, West 43rd, that is, there's more sources over in that area. It's closer to industrial regions and so forth. Central Phoenix tends to get higher because it tends to get hit with the dust storms at a greater frequency. So the dust storms kind of come through the Southeast Valley, and they tend to move up. They hit the Scottsdale area, and they come into Phoenix, and they tend to hit that Central Phoenix area, and it gives that elevated amount there. Now, PM 2.5, this is the fine particles, which mainly come from smoke. And once again, you can see that we're in the moderate region, or the moderate AQI for most of the sites where we're measuring PM 2.5. PM 2.5 is a problem in the wintertime, and it mainly comes from a number of effects. One would be wood burning, and then also from atmospheric effects. So you have inversion layers, temperature inversion layers in the wintertime that tend to hold pollutants down close to the ground. So when there's a lot of activity going on with like wood smoke emissions and so forth, the weather itself actually holds these pollutants in. It's much less of a problem in the summertime, although occasionally when the really big dust storms come in, there can be spikes in the fine particles as well. There's particles of all different sorts in a dust storm, not only the large particles, but small, and they all tend to have an impact in the summer. But it's really the wintertime that we're concerned with the fine particles. Next slide, please. So Maricopa County, and that's kind of my presentation of the data at our monitoring sites, but I want to talk about some of the programs that we have to try to mitigate some of these values that we're seeing. Ozone, of course, is one of our biggest concerns, and so the county has an ozone campaign. Now, ozone, as it was mentioned in the Matthew mentioned how ozone is created, and it's a sunlight-driven pollutant, and so therefore it's a summer problem based upon the angle of the sun, the heat in the atmosphere, and so forth. Ozone becomes an issue in the summer, and therefore we launch our campaign from April to September. These are the months that we have issues with ozone. Now, the ozone campaign is really focused. It's a focused outreach program to the citizens of the county, trying to get people to commit to one day to do something to reduce emissions. Now, this really focuses on transportation because there's the nitrogen dioxide and the VOCs. A lot of those are being sourced from vehicles, especially nitrogen dioxide, which is mainly sourced from mobile sources. And so we focus on things like riding public transit, bus, light rail, doing carpool, biking, walking. We also talk about, instead of going through a drive-through, parking your vehicle and walking into a restaurant and so forth, to keep the vehicles from idling. We talked about using gas-powered lawn equipment on these high pollution days, reducing the use of those because the gas-powered equipment can put out a lot of these VOCs and NOx compounds. And we do a variety of outreach activities like billboards and radio spots and light rail wraps and so forth. Next slide, please. Another program that we have is the Mowing Down Pollution Program. And once again, this is really focused at controlling ozone issues. And what this program does is it allows residents, and this is open to anyone in Maricopa County, if you sign up for it, you can bring in a gas-powered lawnmower and trade it in at one of the Maricopa County sites, and you'll get a voucher for $150 to purchase an electric lawnmower. So we've partnered with Home Depot on this program, and once that lawnmower is turned in, it'll be disabled and destroyed, eventually recycled, and then you can take your voucher to Home Depot and get an electric lawnmower. Now, these normally start up in the spring, and they're limited. Well, they've been limited to about 1,000 vouchers a year. So it's a first come first serve that you can sign up for and get your voucher. It's been very popular. We've gone through those vouchers every year. But it takes a lot of these older lawnmowers off, out of use and saves quite a bit of emissions. Next slide, please. So when we're coming into the winter time, like I mentioned before, a lot of the problems with the PM 2.5 is based upon wood smoke and burning. So we start our outreach campaign called Burn Cleaner, Burn Better. Now this campaign is focused at talking to citizens and telling them about the problems with burning on no burn days. So between the ADEQ in Maricopa County, we have meteorologists that are constantly looking at the weather and they're forecasting values for how these inversion layers are going to act and how they're going to hold in the pollutants and so forth. And when the forecasters predict that it's going to be a bad day, or either weather conditions are going to be really bad for ventilating these smoke out of the valley, or if it's a historically, if it's an event that has a historical history of a lot of emissions, such as Christmas or New Year's, into these holidays where there's a lot of people burning, and then we have just a long history of really bad air pollution on those days. The call will go out to make it a no burn day, and so we're trying to educate the public on what the no burn days are about, why it's important to respect them, and to do that, we have a number of these types of media that we go through. So we have billboards, we have TV, radio, online, newspapers. We've participated, or we're teaming up with some of the grocery stores like Bash's to put signs out that talk about, there's a no burn day. There's, of course, the freeway signs that are probably one of the most visible things, the signs that will announce that it's a no burn day. And this has actually been very successful. We've been doing it for quite a few years now. I believe it started in 2013, if I'm correct. And awareness of the no burn days and the Burn Cleaner, Burn Better program has been going up year after year. More people are now aware of what a no burn day is. When we call it, they have a lot greater compliance with those no burn days. We're seeing that. And the effect of that is that we've seen in the data, we've seen a lowering of those PM 2.5 values in the wintertime. So they're still elevated values when we have these no burn days, but they're not as great as they used to be. We were coming really close to violating the health standards for PM 2.5, which could have thrown us into non-attainment for that pollutant and caused a lot of problems. Through the Burn Cleaner, Burn Better program, we've lowered those values and kind of backed away from that ledge, and it's still an issue, but it's in a lot better position than we were. Next slide, please. Another program that we have, once again focused on reducing wood smoke, is our Maricopa County Fireplace Retrofit Program. What this program is designed to do is to reduce air pollution by modernizing wood-burning fireplaces. There's a target area for this, so this is not open to all Maricopa County residents. The resident needs to live within the target area. Now that's between Northern Avenue and Baseline and 16th Street all the way to 59th Avenue. This is the area of the greatest impact of wood smoke, and therefore we focused on that as our retrofit program area. Now, with this program, a citizen that has a wood burning fireplace can get that upgraded to either a natural gas log set or an air pollution reduction device. The natural gas log set, of course, would be the cleanest option, but the house has to have natural gas, of course, and it has to have an inspection. The fireplace and the chimney and the hearth needs to be approved to put that in place. The other option, if they didn't have that, would be these air pollution reduction devices. And these were, they're sort of like a catalytic converter that you would put into your flue. And then as a fire heated them up, it destroys a certain amount of the smoke emissions. It actually it does 70% of the emissions get destroyed through these reduction devices. Now, right now, we're not offering that at the moment because of our vendor dropped out of it, so we don't actually have a vendor, and we're only doing the gas log sets. And I'm not sure if the reduction devices are coming back, but the natural gas log sets were the more popular option. So as of July, we had done 800 of these retrofits, and 70% of that was the natural gas log sets. So it's a rather substantial reduction in the amount of emissions from wood smoke in the urban core of Phoenix. Next slide, please. And then the last program here is the propane fire pit program, recognizing that the wood smoke problem is not just wood burning fire pits, or fireplaces, but it's also outdoor fire pits. We started this program, and this is open to any resident in Maricopa County. There's no area restrictions. And once again, we partnered up with Home Depot for this program, and a resident can sign up for it and get a $75 voucher for purchasing a gas fire pit from Home Depot. And they have an approved list that they would sell. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure how many models they have, but there's quite a few that you can choose from. And of course, the object here is to get away from the wood burning fire pits and go to the cleaner burning option and reduce emissions. And that concludes my my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. This is Roseanne again, and just to conclude, we wanted just to share that as we continue to address air quality, you've heard about particulate matter, PM10, PM2.5, and ozone today. We're going to continue working not only in the city of Phoenix, but with other partners on education and outreach, continue to work on addressing outdoor fires and outdoor combustibles. And then one more item that is focused on air quality as well is a climate action plan. So if you go to the next slide, I just want to share with you that we are in the process of developing a climate action plan. We want to get it done next year. And one of the things that we're doing to gather input, and this is just going to be our second workshop, is on December 3rd. We have a virtual workshop from 4:30 to 6, We're going to focus on water, heat, and energy. And we would love for you to participate and share this information. You can register by going to climate@phoenix.gov by November 27th, if you could.
Ria, can we
And the
turn down the
framework
volume a
that
little
we
bit?
have put out, which is just the foundation that sets the basics for the climate action plan, is available at phoenix.gov/climate. So we anticipate additional workshops in January, February of next year, and we'll gather all of that input and incorporate it into the final action plan, which we hope to have a draft of by summertime. So air
It's a
quality.
little loud. Yeah, more her. Okay. Sorry, we didn't mean to cut you off. We're probably going to pop back in just a second, but I wanted to give y'all a second to breathe and to share what you're feeling from what you just heard for just a minute. You can, oh, here we go. This is why we need to leverage our power to shift those conversations that are held. Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. I wonder if there's an income cap for those who receive discounts from Home Depot. That's a very good question, as she kills us with her pollution. So yeah, can we please just drop in there, tell me your organic reaction to what we just heard and how they were speaking.
This is Courtney. I'm just appalled, like honestly, like just how out of touch they are with the reality of the health issues that it's causing, what the communities are actually doing. Like they're acting like everybody's at home barbecuing and sitting in their lawns, like mowing it. Like how out of touch with your community are you? And then the behavior modifications that they have don't even apply. Like they say nothing about climate change, nothing about COVID, where drive-through is the only option. And that's the least of the issues of what's causing the pollution. Like they're not addressing any of the main polluters.
And I did not hear them once mention actual people and the problems that these pollutants and the science are actually causing, all the asthma triggers for all our little brown and black children and adults out that way too. I mean, amongst other health disparities that are caused by this pollution.
And then just like how unrealistic or the non-reality of like, oh, well, if we don't count dust days, well, we have dust days, that's reality. Like, it's crazy. He sounds like a complete climate change denier.
Oh, Liz, it says the committee's responding. Should we pop back up, Joe or Ria? They're shifting blame for poor air quality on the individual actions for fire mowing instead of the industry.
Attainment for that pollutant. We were exceeding the health standards. The values have been so low for so long that we recently just started to close down CO stations. We haven't had a value that's gone out of the good range in decades. And in fact, we have difficulty sometimes keeping our monitors out of the negatives. It tends to be a little bit higher in the winter than in the summer. And so but still, even with those seasonal effects, CO is just not much of an issue anymore. And this is not just here in Phoenix, but this is a national phenomenon that we're seeing. With cars being so much cleaner, CO values have just dropped dramatically across the entire nation. And therefore, we've been cutting back sites. And so, whereas right now we only have the 4 sites within Phoenix, there's also a few other sites outside of Phoenix. Glendale has still got a CO monitor running. We have some background sites with CO monitors as well. But that's the reason why there's not as many with the CO. Now, with the NO2, this is a pollutant that once again, it's in non-attainment, or I'm sorry, it's in attainment. It's never exceeded the health standards. And we historically have had a lower number of these monitors, and they've mainly been focused on roads. And so that is, as we place these things, we have 2 near road monitors. One was over in Tempe, and then one is over on 33rd Avenue. That's a near road monitor where it sits right on the freeway. And we've placed those where we can see our the highest expected values of this pollutant. It's sitting right on the edge of the freeway in rush hour traffic. These are our highest expected values that we get. Now, that being said, we do have several monitors that are located in neighborhoods as well. and they give us a representative amount. When we talk about representative monitoring, and this is how we it's spelled out in the regulations for how you plan out your monitoring network. You look for areas that are similar, and then you can do a representative site. So for instance, site for NO2 in a neighborhood, residential neighborhood with few NO2 sources. So the main source of NO2 around West Phoenix would be vehicle traffic. It would be arterial road traffic or local traffic versus highways and so forth. So West Phoenix represents a lot of these areas. Now, one of the things that we are doing with NO2 is we're looking at using.
This is dragging. So they're still talking about item 4, which is air quality. They're dragging that on so that we don't lose you all into a data-induced coma. I want to ask Jennifer if you could please just enlighten us a little bit about what it is that we're hearing. Yeah, so maybe you can enlighten us on why this agenda item is so important and why do we need to organize around this?
Yeah, so tonight we jumped into agenda item 4, which is about air quality. And part of why we did that is we see these presentations come through the city where these experts that, as you all have clearly pointed out, are very disconnected from the community, from people, are sharing these presentations and providing this data. Which most of these agenda items, for example, this one tonight is for discussion only, but these discussions go places. So the data is often presented in a way because often these agenda items go to vote and these votes go to city council, or our recommendations as a committee will go to city council for their review. And typically city council doesn't adopt what happens here. So what's critically important about this agenda item as an example, and why we're here to speak on agenda item 6 tonight, is because of the impact it can have. So the kinds of questions you all are asking in the chat, talking about, yes.
Jennifer, can you tell them a little bit about what agenda item 6 actually is?
Yes, so agenda item 6 tonight its formal reading is regarding the South Central TOD policy plan adoption schedule and an additional focused engagement activity to reach, engage, listen to target populations.
What does that actually really mean though?
Exactly. So, and I think it's also important to note that the South Central TOD has been meeting for years at this point. And up until this point hasn't felt it important enough to create an entire agenda item around what community engagement really looks like. The city had their impression of what community engagement looked like. It looked like buying people sandwiches and having people put stickers on a map. But what we have the opportunity to expand on here tonight, as well as moving forward, is to get more of that direct community input. So tonight we're looking to have folks open that conversation and include things about who's being directly impacted by this decision. Where does housing and housing violence come in? Is there space to talk about incarceration and policing, about food apartheid, about the health outcomes of the residents of South Phoenix? So when these comments are made, and what is intended to happen is on agenda item 6, when they're saying, oh, well, now we want to talk about engagement. There's a lot of community folks who have shown up tonight and have registered to speak, to provide that feedback, that comment of who should the city be talking to, what should they be reading, and why. And one thing that's critically important about this is, number one, because this process has been left off, business as usual is to notify people within right around 200 yards of a project site, and the HOAs within 2 miles, which centers only people who own houses. It doesn't center anyone who lives in an apartment. It doesn't center anyone who served, works, plays, goes to school, or worships in our area. And this provides us the opportunity to show them what good community engagement looks like, what we want to see, and who we need in these spaces. So there's a lot of power and privilege for the folks sitting on this committee, and we're hoping tonight to start to open that door for those most directly impacted to be centered in these conversations and for it to be recorded as a part of public record.
So as it stands right now, I know we have several organizing groups on the call, I believe, but who is involved? Whose voice are they asking for now? Are they involving any of these community action groups as we speak?
Up to this point, no. It's only been folks who have either taken the time and energy, just like you all are tonight, to sit through goodness knows how many hours of agenda items before they have the opportunity to speak. And again, the city doesn't have to owe the public a response. The city only owes committee members a response to their questions and needs. So, but this goes much further. So after the TOD committee meets, just like the village planning committees, it goes on to other spaces where votes and actions are taken. So another thing we're hoping from showing them these community groups tonight is to show them what equitable engagement looks like and the people that should be in these spaces. This presentation and the things that come out of this committee and potentially this agenda item tonight are going to go to all the village planning committees. So that's 15 committees potentially across the entire city of Phoenix to show the folks of power and privilege on those committees what equitable and true engagement around development that centers those most directly impacted look like. It's also going to go on to city council and show the city council folks when they put folks on the committee what impact that has on land use development and centering those most directly impacted, as well as it shows developers that people in South Phoenix care about what's happening in their community, that they have a voice, that they have a choice, and that they deserve to have those most directly impacted in all of their needs, not just the needs that benefit businesses, centered in these conversations and spaces.
There is a question just dropped in the chat. Ria, I'm going to let you get to Joe's mutual aid call for mutual aid discussion, but can we answer Zach's question, Jennifer?
Yeah. Zach's question, for those of you who don't see it, is there going to be discussion on who's going to gain property from the TOD? So likely not at this meeting. It has come up several times before. So again, the purpose of the TOD is in two pieces, to hear from stakeholders, not necessarily to act on anything, and to create accommodations for businesses along the South Central Light Rail. So consistently in these spaces, who Valley Metro sends, the programs that the city has created has been focused on businesses. It's been asked very directly by committee members, both on this committee and the village planning committee, about what land is changing hands, what is being done in an effort for folks who live along the light rail to not have their area gentrified, to be priced out, to increase housing prices. And their response was, and I quote, "That's just capitalism." So it's unlikely to be discussed any further tonight. It has come up in other spaces with kind of the responses that we expect in this area, which is also why there's going to be such a large group and community organizing response tonight to take control and shift that narrative and conversation.
Thank you, Jennifer. God, you're such a maven with this information. Seriously, so excited to have you here. We're going to, since they're still dragging out this whole data and air quality situation, Ria, can we just readjust the agenda a little bit and have you talk about mutual aid work?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Zoraida, and thank you so much, Jennifer. That was such a great way to place all this, what I consider nonsense. And so, like, we wanted to take this opportunity, most likely at the end, but we'll do it right now, to give space to the amazing work of our organizing partners today. So we really couldn't have done this action without them and without their, willingness to kind of meet us halfway and, do like a very last minute action around this meeting. So, as Lorenzo Camboa Irvin says, we must make ourselves and our communities ungovernable by a violent system. And we can practice that through mutual aid. We know that liberation does not move at the speed of bureaucracy, and we must be the liberation our people need, which we can only do through different mutual aid efforts. So I want to invite our organizing partners to briefly talk about the work they're doing, especially centered around addressing displacement through a mutual aid framework. So, we've talked about housing violence, about food apartheid, about food deserts, about mass incarceration and public safety. And for example, we at Mass Liberation Arizona have centered our mutual aid efforts around participatory defense work for activists who are being politically prosecuted by the state for marching for racial justice. So I actually like to call on right now, if they are there, either Cece or Will, if I'm worried about rent, to kind of briefly take us through the work that the amazing organizing they're doing at their organization. And sorry to like kind of, oh, go ahead.
No, you're totally good. Thank you so much for giving us some space to talk about the work we do. The organization I represent is Worried About Rent, where we aim to address the deep-rooted racial and economic segregation in Phoenix, as well as the gentrification and displacement of our ongoing housing crisis. Worried About Rent provides all of the organizing tools and educational resources to build on the strength and leadership within our neighborhoods. We're looking at specifically building tenant power here. We're looking at building tenant collective power, and really just fighting back against predatory landlords and developers, you know, with the community that we grow within our neighborhood. And if my co-organizer Will can also speak on this as well.
Sure. Yeah. We're basically just trying to put the power directly into the people's hands and develop leadership through that. Other people that are engaged with this, but at the same time, you don't experience it as something you can change. You know, you get the contract for the building you're going to move into, you sign it, and there's not much to it. I mean, even legislation around landlord and tenant relations is written by a person who actually is one of the biggest evictors in the state and went by the name like Evictor Doctor. So they've always been putting property over people. We're doing is giving people power and collective strength so that they can organize to fight back and at a scale that can really affect change.
Thank you so much, Cece and Will. If you can, like, drop your, maybe social media handles in the chat so folks can also get in, plug into that work. Now, if I could ask Ronnie if she is there from Housing Initiative Project to talk about the work HIP is doing.
I am here and I'm so happy to. Thank you so much for this, Ria. So yeah, my name is Ronnie. I'm representing the Housing Initiative Project here tonight and on the call this evening. Who are we? We are members of the community, supporting the community, while our elected officials willfully ignore the steady rise in evictions, the absence of affordable housing, and the persistent gentrification of the Phoenix metropolitan area. We center and uplift the most marginalized members of our community to shape an inclusive future for our neighborhoods, and we achieve this through our core values, which are focusing on restorative justice to reduce interstitial harm, to promote healing and reconciliation within our communities, prioritizing people over profit. Housing should center the needs of our community and not developers, landlords, or property owners. Collective liberation and solidarity, working together is what will make change. We cannot win what we deserve if we fight alone. We're stronger together. Horizontal movement, and we build up housing justice from our homes, our neighborhoods, to connections which span across the city. And HIP Phoenix encourages organizers to learn their rights and share their knowledge and resources within their community to amplify healing. And the point that I'm speaking to tonight that I want to plug is direct from the South Mountain Village Annual Report in 2019. This is a quote, you guys. It says, "The City of Phoenix, in collaboration with project partners, community stakeholders, and the Mayor and Council appointed steering committee, will develop a TOD policy plan specific to the South Central Corridor. This plan will serve to attract, guide, and prioritize strategic investments in infrastructure, housing, economic development, and other areas to realize a shared community vision for the future of the corridor." They literally say it themselves right there. They are prioritizing property over people. So, oops.
Ooh, thank you so much, Ronnie. That was, yeah.
I'm excited to use that one.
And Ronnie and Will and Cece, I think, are all talking. We'll be leaving a public comment, which we hopefully all can hear today if they get past this air quality thing. But I'd like to call on Hannah now, who organizes with Sunrise Movement Phoenix here.
Hi, thank you, Ria. Yes, I'm a Sunrise Movement Phoenix. We are a youth-led climate change organization dedicated to fighting climate change here in Phoenix. And the work that we've been doing with Mass Liberation in partnership with Trans Square Pueblo is work that was started by Trans Square Pueblo when an undocumented person was arrested on one of the light rail platforms. And they started deportation proceedings for this person. So, we acknowledge that there need to be ways to get around in the city for people who do not have cars. There need to be cleaner ways to get around in the city. But the way the city is doing it is the most violent and harmful way possible by, displacing communities with absolutely zero community input and by heavily policing um, public transit. It places the people who need it most and who are most vulnerable. Black people, undocumented people in the most harm's way. And so the work that we're doing with Trans Square Pueblo and in collaboration with Mass Liberation, their wonderful resegregation in the city political education series, is bringing awareness to the violence and the harm that light rail is causing in the community. And working to get cops out of light rail, to making it less violent and to making sure that the city knows that they can't be planning these things without the people who are most affected.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for that very elaborative, is that a word? Yes, detailed look at what the work that Sunrise is doing, especially with us and TQP. I wanted to ask if Sophia from Unsheltered Phoenix or Keisha from Unsheltered Phoenix were here right now. I'm sorry, I can't see like the participant list. They may not be. And if they're not, that's okay. We will hear from them later too. I think now I'm going to pass it back to Zoraida, and I think Zoraida is going to pass it back to Jennifer, but just for now, let me do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ria, and thank you to all of you amazing partners doing such amazing work. Like, I swear every time I'm in the space with y'all, I get goose pimples and fairy kisses all over my face because you do the most amazing work and community really needs you. So thank you for doing what you do. But since they're still dragging on this data, I cannot believe it's been an hour and 10 minutes. I cannot believe they're still doing this since we've been on this phone. We probably had 15 minutes before they started, so do that math. But while we're waiting, Jennifer, if you don't mind, I'd like to put you more on the spot. Do you mind?
Not at all.
All right.
So we wanted to unpack a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask if you could just unpack exactly what's happening next. Like, why are we still waiting? What happens next on the agenda? Why does it matter? What are we asking for?
Yeah, so having been in these spaces for quite some time, and any of you who've been on a village planning committee meeting, a city council meeting, will understand and kind of remember the feeling of, we're going to go around and round with committee members and questions and responses. And it's very likely that this agenda item will continue. But as our amazing community partners who've shared a little bit tonight, this space is so important. And our spirit is not broken by long conversations about data. So after this we're still in 4. We have agenda item number 5, which is going to be another presentation by the city. And again, questions from the committee, which can take up to, a chunk of time. But what we have brought everyone into the space here tonight was to unpack and talk about or speak on, if you're part of an organization, agenda item number 6. And it's very likely for those of you who can remain with the committee on tonight. And we'll also share in the chat the link if you would like to attend as a guest the South Central TOD meeting yourself to bear witness to the remainder of it if you can't stay in this space with us. But again, agenda item number 6 is where we're talking about that equitable engagement. And what we're really asking, and what the agenda item is designed to do, is again to start that conversation on what real, true, good, equitable engagement that centers those most directly impacted looks like. So what we're hoping, and what some of you have already probably seen, heard, or felt tonight, is that there's more work to be done. So there is, and we'll share with all of you, the email for the planner, you can see that the Planning and Development Department is the host for this. Each committee has an urban planner assigned to it who is responsible for taking feedback from the community. So we're hoping that you'll share a little bit of that feedback. One thing that we're hoping to come as a byproduct of tonight is to create some subcommittees on equitable engagement or on further engagement around the South Central Light Rail. So if you can pass on that feedback, we're really looking for you to help tell them who needs to be in that space. So what participants, what community organizers need to be in that space, what small groups, what all the folks that have spoken tonight and more. There's lots of great organizations that you all know of and you all work with and play with and go to school with every day that are affected by these decisions happening in South Phoenix. So who needs to be in that room for those subcommittees and what needs to be on the agenda? So if we're thinking that we have the power and control of that agenda of who's in this room and what are they talking about, and if everything comes out of that space to better direct this committee, what is that going to look like? And to do a little bit of dreaming. So, and to pass that right on to the city planners. So, one thing to note is that when you send an email to someone at phoenix.gov that is a part of the public office, your comments will be a part of public record and they can be requested. So just to keep that in mind, for some of you that may make you choose a little bit differently, maybe what email you send it from, a work email or a personal email, that may have some of you choose how you sign or don't sign the email. But everything is going to go to public record from these emails. And also because of that, we're going to have you BCC Mass Lib on it. Because one thing that we know that the city loves to do is say, oh, I didn't hear anything from the community, or, oh, we only had one person show up to the meeting, or nobody showed up to the meeting, so we canceled it, or we didn't get any feedback. So we would love to hold them accountable. So part of that is going to be BCCing the Mass Lib email.
It looks like they're moving on to agenda item 5. Should we come back to this and then?
We weren't planning on listening to 5, but we can. And there is Elias, the person you will be emailing. He's the planner for this committee.
Thank you, Jennifer. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Also on item 4, just as a heads up.
Okay. So I noticed that there was a change. Will they be coming to another meeting
For
the item that was removed?
Oh, it was the item that was removed. It was just placed as the last item on the next agenda.
Okay, great. Right then. So we're on item number 5 now, which is information only. Presentation and update regarding the draft South Central TOD policy plan. You're up.
Okay, Chair Lewis and members of the committee, thank you all for participating in this meeting and letting us do this presentation to inform the public basically of the progress that's being made on the draft policy plan. We checked in with several of you for the month of October, and we did these one-on-one check-ins, and we were able to get feedback and initial reactions from you all on the layout of the draft policy plan. Now, the screen that you see right now shows the draft table of contents, and it shows the basic layout of the policy plan. It'll be through 3 different parts. Part 1, the introduction section, would be more of the background, history, the current conditions, the planning framework, and of course, the public participation and outreach that helped spur this effort and got us to the point where we're at today. Part 2, the vision, is going to outline the vision for the corridor, which is governed by the rejecting the fact that we must reject displacement and prioritize those that are most at risk for displacement. And so through that, we have areas that have been identified by the community as areas to protect, areas to enhance, and areas to invest. And we have the 4 sub areas of the corridor: the north area, the Rio Salado area, the south area, and South Mountain area. So part 3, the implementation, is where we will discuss the goals and measures, the implementation strategies and action plans that can help achieve and accomplish that vision through not just the city, but through our community partners as well. It's a joint collaborative effort. And then the appendix as well. So today what we're going to present to the public is a sample of how the vision area is going to be laid out. And we're going to start with the south sub area. And in that area, we're going to show how the layout is going to be in the policy plan as far as how we can achieve the vision for the south area. Starting with the community vision, this was all taken from and compiled from information collected at the community workshops and through the engagement and the field surveys that were conducted. Then it would be followed by a map of protect, enhance, and invest. What that means is different areas and levels and scales of development that were supported by the community, and they were identified and referenced in this map by the lighter colors being protect and the darker colors being invest. And basically, as the color intensifies, that's the scale of the type of development that would be more suitable for that location based off of the underlying zoning and along with the community's input so that it was able to be refined. And even with the steering committee's input at our additional workshops that we had, where the committee identified areas that needed to be protect instead of a higher development. Then the community identified the type of investments they would like to see within those areas. The following map shows for the three elements of land use, housing, and economic development, and the paragraphs underneath each of those letters explain the type of investments and amenities that the community wants to see within those areas in the sub area. The following map then would show for the remaining three elements of health, green system, and mobility, and showing the networks of connectivity and the types of investments that would enhance those type of elements. Each sub area will also show an illustration of what a potential build out would look like for the quarter-mile area from each of the stations. South area has three stations: Broadway, Rozier Station, and Southern Station. Each of these maps, let me go back to the first one, identifies the points of pride and the gold-colored buildings, the areas to protect, which are the grayed out areas, the areas to enhance, which are the more teal areas, and then the areas to invest, which are the darker areas. What that shows is that there's still a mixture of different types of uses around the station areas that are being envisioned. And this build out here would look for 2045. So this isn't going to happen overnight. It would be incremental, meaning kind of at a steady pace so that it doesn't just, so it minimizes any effects of displacement, and that it also transitions and fits into the character of the corridor. Following those illustrations of the station buildouts, there's going to be a map that identifies the land use priorities that the community identified through the exercises at the workshops. What you can see here is that there's still infill development that's residential within the neighborhoods, but there's in essence a demand for mixed use style developments along the corridors and arterial roads. So, and it makes sense because you notice that it's not just all this mixed use in the middle of neighborhoods. It shows it along the major arterials and especially more concentrated next to the station areas. Similarly, the community identified opportunities for open space investment, and that's compared to the existing open space that's already in the corridor, so that we can make sure that it's within reasonable distances, but also at the same time, it shows that they want an enhanced connected network of shaded streets that is going to help overall health and that heat island effect and make it a more pleasant area to actually walk around in and encourage walking, because if you shade it, they will walk. So based off of those initial one-on-ones we had with you in October, we also had some valuable takeaways from it. First of all, the table of contents that we showed earlier, we are refining that because there were recommendations to make the rejecting displacement more visible in the table of contents. It really doesn't stand out or pop out, and we are definitely going to work on that to make that be more of a standout verbiage. And it was also discussed with the committee members, and many of the feedback was that it does follow a logical, and it's easy to understand and see how it would flow. So from the introduction to the implementation, but also in the sub areas, how it shows you from the community vision all the way to what type of investments they want to see. But with the vision, one thing that was stressed was we need to provide more detail on the heights and height transitions so that we're mindful of the existing housing, prioritize the most marginalized, and it does seem a little overwhelming because there's a wealth of information along those pages. So staff is working as best as we can to help make that information at a more digestible pace. The measurable outcomes, we didn't go through those today, but we did go through them as the committee. We were able to find out that we do need to provide several definitions on a lot of those measurable outcomes. They need to reflect what the community wanted, and that it should be measured from the perspective of a corridor resident and not from an outsider, which could then, unintentionally have some effects on there. So all of those measures are being fine-tuned and to meet those requirements from you all. And just some other things that were brought out was to showcase the planning element framework, show how those 6 elements function together and can meet and work in tandem to help achieve a sustainable community. Make sure we list and identify all of the outreach that was conducted. Add a how to use the plan section for those that may not be aware of how to use a policy plan, and add the appendix, which can have supporting documentation and materials from the community partners that were involved in the process as well. So with that, I want to get any additional thoughts from the committee members. This is your opportunity to speak and talk about just the process
Y'all want to
overall.
hear the rest of this input from the committee, or can we switch out?
Wanted to recommend that we
should
include.
listen.
Now is the time. We're obviously going to have more conversations, but this is just your opportunity at this point for me to take any additional feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Elias. Is there any comments?
Do we have any public comments?
I don't, do we have any public comments?
We don't have public comments on this item. It's on the next item, which is a continuation of this. I can transition into that next item. It's another presentation, but we do have 8 public comments on that item.
Okay, so I actually have a couple, just a brief comment. So I want to make sure I understand. This is just a sampling of what it potentially could look like for one section of the pathway. Am I correct?
Yes, Chair. And it would basically be like the mold for the other 3.
Sure. And then the second question I have, there's 2. One was in the appendix, will we be including a glossary of terms? I know that there is like an immense number of acronyms that we have tendency to use, and I don't know if I haven't seen a lot of them, but if it's not included in the appendix, I'd like to see something in there, especially about the acronyms, and then also because I know one of the concerns I had was developing a plan and then it having to be parked on a desk somewhere. I really think that we have to have some kind of strong commitment to carry this plan forward. And what's that plan? I believe that plan needs to be wrapped into this document in some way, shape, or form, but that's just my opinion. I see Mr. Reese has his hand up. Mr. Reese?
Yes, thank you. Good evening.
I think that, on that plan, it'll probably need just a few more tweaks on it, only because I saw there was one building that was scheduled for it to be preserved, is the Mary's Ministries buildings on Central Avenue, and that burned, like 6 months ago. But it still shows it as existing on the plan. And so I think there's going to have to be these final tweaks about what's there and what's not. I know that there's, want to wrap it up and then and start to give the city council, mayor and city council an overview, but I still think it's going to need some touch-ups.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Are there any other comments? And before I forget my thought, I do want to add one more thing. Mr. Reeds, could you put your hand down so I don't get confused? Please. So I have one more comment, and the comment I have was about, so it kind of to his point is that this is what it looks like today. Is there a planned revision and update commitment date for?
Whew. Trigger.
Awesome. Yeah, we're gonna need some calming breath at the end of this meeting.
Seriously, trigger. Hannah, oh no, I'm sorry, not Hannah, excuse me, Jennifer, can we please unpack a little bit about what we just heard?
Yeah, so long story short, that was the city's version of engagement. And as you saw, it was white people, it was cops, it was business owners who were providing the input on what the city should do. And as someone who attended that meeting, I can tell you at no point there was like, oh, we would love to add affordable housing. We would love to decrease policing. We need more grocery stores. We need more health centers. We need to make sure that people are protected from gentrification. It was largely just like, oh, like, where would you like another tree? Or where else can we put that? So we know we have agenda item number 6 coming up right now, which is what we've all been waiting for this evening. So again, we want to kind of encourage you, as we brought up before, the goal of kind of absorbing what's going on in this agenda item is to draft that email that we can send to Elias, again, about who and what needs to be happening in these ongoing conversations about engagement. And again, our goal from this is to set a precedent throughout the city of what high quality, community-centered engagement looks like. So with that, we're going to pop back over for agenda item number 6. That's also all of our fabulous mutual aid folks who came here tonight are going to be speaking on that agenda item. Again, it will still go city committee answers public. So you might be here for a little bit. So we hope you continue to hang out with us. But for the time that you are able to continue to spend in the space, all those thoughts, feelings, frustrations, toss them in that email. You know, you can really shape it out later into something that you're very proud to pass on to the city. And again, we're BCCing Mass Lib on that, so we don't lose any of your incredibly valuable input as we move this process forward.
Thank you, Jennifer, so much for grounding us in that space.
Yes, rock and roll to 6.
Here we go. Keep your ears open, y'all.
This assessments, we've had our public meetings, and we've had all these wonderful groups that have been partnering up and meeting concurrently during the same time we're working on this process to provide feedback as well, such as SOFO convening the South Central Collaborative. And of course, we have those briefing papers from the consultants that help spur and showcase that we need to minimize the risk of displacement from the beginning of this process. So here is a very brief timeline of what the committee, how rejecting displacement came to be into this policy plan. So we've had it in the briefing paper since they were brought out. During our special steering committee's workshop, it was brought out, the nail was driven home that we need to reject displacement. And currently and ongoing, we continue to have these discussions, and the committee has continued to express that we need to prioritize the needs of those populations highest at risk. So who are we talking about when we say reject displacement. So two ways that can be viewed at are location-based and socioeconomic based. And so what I can explain briefly with that is these are the populations that are challenged, and when you're location-based, it would be certain neighborhoods. Maybe there's areas where there's low to moderate income residents, areas where the land values and rents are increasing, or where there's lack of housing product. Socioeconomic could be other things, such as formerly incarcerated, recently homeless and sheltered, and single women with children. So what this is showing right now is that we are in a prime position right now where we have an opportunity to do some targeted engagement. So there has been a lot of great work done, but there is also an urgency that we need to make sure that those that are at risk have had an equitable engagement effort as well. The reason this is important is because we need to validate and reinforce the work that has been done to this point before we take it to the villages, planning commission, and council. And so this will also help to identify any additional needs and actions that may come out of this targeted engagement. So how can we reach these populations to make sure that we capture and listen to their voice before moving forward? And not that we haven't done outreach to them, this is just to refine and see where we're at and see if anything else needs to be included, or if anything was left out. Now is the time to make sure that we capture that. So how could we do that? Maybe it can be done by pursuing collaborative engagement with some of our neighborhood leaders and organizations. So those neighborhood leaders and organizations are more of a location based, meaning they handle certain areas. Or we could also partner with those organizations that specifically have relationships already with those targeted populations. Now, socioeconomic deal with those situations, not necessarily just in a certain neighborhood. So maybe a combination of that would be effective. So how can we capture and listen to everything that we've done? How can we do that? Well, maybe we can start by having an overview presentation of all of the work and effort that's been done to this point. Some of them may be aware of it. Others, it may be the first time that they're hearing. Either way, starting off with an overview makes perfect sense. Then we can engage in an activity that we've done at all of our workshops, but that's catered to their needs, using the priority investment activity like we did, where it shows what types of investments you want to see and where in the corridor. Perhaps if we have some displacement experts that are helping them with those investment card options, that can really ensure that their voices are truly being captured. We think that targeted engagement can fit into our schedule, but we'd like to hear the committee's thoughts and discussion. Before we start that, I just want to discuss briefly what's displayed right now. You can see that this is for the next about roughly 6 months that's displayed there. Mr. Larios had mentioned, what's the timeline looking like? And so this is what I had mentioned that later on in the presentation, we were going to get to a slide like that. So you can see right now, we're just having an initial draft vision overview. Next month, we anticipate having the committee's input on additional review. And the targeted engagement perhaps could fit in between December and January before the steering committee has to take any action. We feel that realistically we can attain that and achieve that, but we just want to have you all have a discussion right now and get your thoughts on that.
I'm sorry, I was talking to myself. I forgot to turn on my mic. Mr. Brunel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Elias, I think one of the things we're missing in this is that talking to the residents and talking to the people, which I think we've done a really good job so far, and we can always do better, and I hope we do in the future. But the problem, especially when you talk about displacement based on place, okay, is that, someplace, somehow or other, and I don't think you can tell me how, we have to get developers to build products that will specifically move people in dilapidated housing and problem neighborhoods into housing that is in the corridor. And I don't think you can do that by going to those people. You have to do that by going to developers and people that do that kind of thing. And I don't see anything on here that talks about developer tours, developer relationships, developer meetings, that kind of thing. And by developers, I don't mean just for-profit, nonprofit, all kinds of developers, because they're the ones that have to solve that problem, unless you've already solved it and haven't told me. But it seems to me that that's got to be built into the next 6 months if we're going to be honest about it. Talking about people that need something but don't have the assets or power to fix it doesn't really help fix the problem. So not that I think that that's not important, but we have to have another step. We've already had that step, and it might not be complete, but we haven't even started the step where we're starting to relate to the people that can actually solve these problems. So that would be my input. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, feedback?
This is Isabel Chavez. I just want to say I agree with Mr. Brownell. Having conversations with people that really can't make any decision as to how these lands are used, other than the developers, is kind of a waste of time, right? So I do agree with him.
Thank you, Ms. Chavez. Are there any other comments or feedback? Yeah, let me see. Mr. Larios?
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't find my unmute.
Joseph Larios?
I'll go.
Joseph?
Carol Lee,
yes.
Mr. Larios was saying that he's okay with going.
Okay, go ahead. Ms. Who's next here? Ms. Duarte?
Thank you. I agree that the developers play a very important role, but what is very critically important is being able to identify the different resources and tools available to help cover the gap, because we have a math problem. It's not that developers don't want to do it, it's that the numbers don't work. And if we truly are going to serve extremely low income, because we really need to, that is a big population that we don't have the adequate housing. But the subsidy, we need some resources to be able to build that type of housing, and strong encouragement requirements, whatever the right word is, to make sure that it's incorporated along the corridor in all the developments, so that it's not just saturated in one particular area. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duarte. Mr. Larios?
Hi, everyone. So, part of equitable engagement is about understanding the experiences of those most directly impacted. And I think the only way you can do that is by talking to the people who are most vulnerable to displacement. When we think of equitable engagement, it is my understanding that that is where the solutions are. That's a fundamental tenet of what that means. And it just seems like we're really disconnected from that idea, possibly because we haven't talked about equitable engagement enough. But I think it's, there's no way for us to find solutions without one another, but that would include the people most directly impacted. And, developers are not going to save us in this. And so I just, I don't see how we would be able to not talk to people most directly impacted by displacement if that is the goal of what we're putting out there, right, is to reject displacement. We're not going to figure out how to do that without the people who are most directly impacted.
Thank you, Mr. Larios. Let's see, is there anybody else that has any comments to make?
I do.
Ms. Daniels?
Yeah, so I echo what Greg and Patricia are saying in regards that you do have to get developers involved. Yes, we're talking to the community in regards to displacement, but there is that second part. We need to bring in the city governments. We need to bring in for permits to see if there's any way they can waive or reduce the fees for permits, land development. We have to have some type of grants or some type of funding that's going to be given for the developers to be able to lower their price point to be able to build. I work with developers right now, and lumber cost is continuing to go up. The permits continuing to go up. There's other costs that are associated with that as well. You're only going to be able to provide housing and solve a housing problem if you actually have someone or developers that can actually build and not build for free, right? So unfortunately, to completely disengage with the developers doesn't help solve a housing problem. So you either have to have apartments that are at different levels, you have to have apartments that are full price, you have to have apartments that are funded that do the 30%, you have to do some apartments that are 60% of the median income. But you also have to realize that not all of the affordable housing problem is going to be solved just by engaging the community. You have to be able to have investors and people who are willing to gift or fund into the program to allow developers to build affordable housing. And we need to remember that don't just continue to saturate South Phoenix in the 7s to the 7s with affordable housing, because that is how South Phoenix got their the stigma of the community. We need to force the city of Phoenix, to spread affordable housing throughout all of the city of Phoenix, so that people can actually start changing their generational lifestyles and being able to provide their kids in different opportunities.
Thank you. Let's see. Mr. Larios, did you have another comment to make?
Yeah, I just want to be clear. My comment wasn't that we don't engage developers. My comment was in response to the idea that we should only engage developers because they have somehow the decision-making power. I don't want to represent it. And I also want to clarify, the stigma comes from institutionalized racism, not from people living in what is deemed poor housing or affordable housing. And this idea that we're somehow just going to force the other parts of the continue to stigmatize that type of housing and already come out against having this type of housing is not going to work. And so anyway, I just want to clarify, like there are certain things that I'm speaking to, and it's not to just X out developers, but it is to be guided. What we need to be asking developers should be guided by the people most directly impacted. And that's the clarity I want to make.
Okay. Well,
let me see if there's anybody else. Anybody else have a comment to make on this? I would like to make a comment. In Central City South, we had the quality of life plan, and one of the things that we talked about was housing in there. and that even the nonprofits could not go into Central City South and meet the housing needs at a rate that the current residents could afford. So I totally understand about the developers, and I agree with Mr. Larios that you are not going to force developers to do anything. The other thing, though, that I think is very interesting is that I don't want to exclude having partners to answer this question. We're not the only people that need to answer this question. We can create some partnerships that do this. The Soulful Convening had a very interesting presentation about a community group, neighborhood people, residents who created a large organization to address things like this. And they ended up creating their own community development corporation. It was just really interesting. So I do understand really, starting with the wisdom of the neighborhoods, and I really always support that. So that's just my thought. My thoughts are always too that we need to really invite developers who understand that do no harm. So anyway, so all right. So Mr. Elias, it looks like we don't have any committee. Mr. Elias, did you have another comment?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Daniels?
We have public comments on this, right? Is what you said?
Yeah, we're going to come to those as soon as Ms. Daniels makes that comment, because I don't see anybody else have their hand up. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Daniels.
So one of our partners, community partners, Habitat for Humanity. I mean, that should be one of our bigger goals, to partner with Habitat for Humanity. They do a great job. It involves the community as whole as they're building those homes, and a great project that did very well, and actually all of the homeowners are doing extremely well right now, is off of 16th Street in Vineyard, just a little bit west of there. You have that whole Habitat for Humanity community that was built and gave people an opportunity to become homeowners. And they partnered, they had local corporations that donated. It's who the type of people that we should be looking at to partner with, as well as other developers, so that we can mix the community with different types of housing, different levels of housing, which actually helps to create a better community when you have different types of incomes all blended in together.
Committee member comments, and Mr. Elias, we have public comments now. Am I right? I can't hear you. Yes.
Yes, we do have public comments.
Okay, and do we have a list of those public comments? People who've signed up?
Yes.
All right, so we will start with, and I did notice that there was another participant at the bottom, Vanessa DeCarlo.
Yes, and you know what? That's a good question, Chair Olivas. I wanted to clarify if she wanted to speak on agenda item 6 or still on the last agenda item based off of the update that was sent out. I didn't get a response via email saying that she wanted to change it. I kind of noticed that everybody else changed it. So we want to just let her know if she wants to speak on this item, we can move her from the last item and make her the 9th speaker on this one.
Okay, so let's ask her if can you unmute her so that I can ask her if she wants to speak on this? Thank you. Mr. Carlos, yes. Would you like, did you want to speak on this item number 6?
Yes, I would. Yeah, the 9th speaker. That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will start then, Mr. Elias, with Anisha Groves.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge first that I'm here as a concerned resident of the Phoenix metro area, and we don't in any way claim to speak for the directly impacted Black, Brown, Indigenous, queer, and people of color in South Central. But I did just want to raise an issue that might get overlooked, and that's how mass incarceration and policing are inextricably linked to how new development displaces people. I might be speaking about issues already well understood by the committee, and if so, I hope that it just serves as a reminder and a message to the public and to developers. South Central is already over-policed. Families are constantly being torn apart by the wildly disproportionate incarceration rate for this community. When people are finally freed from prisons, they are deprived of housing because of increasing rents, denials by landlords who discriminate. They are then more at risk for being unhoused and in turn at higher risk for contact with police and being incarcerated again. The city already actively participates in this vicious cycle through its bloated police budgets and weak to non-existent policies around police accountability. New development can obviously worsen the situation through increasing housing costs, but it can also worsen in other ways. For example, it's common for new, wealthier white residents to call police on existing residents for engaging in normal daily activities like enjoying music and spending time socializing in the street. The police then start making more and more arrests for quality of life crimes, leading to more surveillance, increasing focus on minor crimes in general, more legitimization of racist policing practices, and further displacing and disappearing people. Some developers even intentionally enlist police to clear out unwanted people from an area to prepare it for development, which is what was happening when Breonna Taylor was murdered. So I know this committee rejects displacement. That's been stated a lot, and that's wonderful to hear. But because profits are routinely placed high above people in this capitalist system, this project could still harm the community through increased policing and increased incarceration. So I suggest that as part of your process, you seek guidance from local organizers who work with residents affected by these issues as part of your engagement, such as Mass Liberation Arizona, Black Lives Matter Phoenix Metro, Poder in Action, Black Phoenix Organizing Collective, and Black Mothers Forum. They could be uniquely positioned to guide this aspect of the project. And I hope that you will make people over property a core value as you proceed so that longtime residents of South Central can genuinely benefit from this light rail extension. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate you being here. I appreciate your comments. Will Meister?
Hello?
Yes.
All right. So, I mean, I've read a lot through these documents, and there's plenty that can kind of seem nice on paper. I even mentioned plans for community land trusts, but it all feels really hollow, especially when you mention the place-based nature of the development process here. You emphasize that sometimes new statutes wouldn't even be necessary. So are we going to just have to trust the promises there? Should we just trust nonprofits like Chicanos por la Casa, who've been evicting dozens of tenants since the beginning of the pandemic and just push through development despite protests within the community and rejection by the South Mountain Village Planning Committee? It's just only highlights the risks that these kind of empty promises and the trust in this essential goodness of nonprofits or some small businesses pose. We can't just solve this with a community land trust, but we need engaged and united tenants. These community land trusts risk professionalization and disconnect from these people otherwise. So then the whole point of having them, which is to increase equity in the community and involve people in homeownership, and completely follow through. And there's no mention of any of these limitations. I mean, what happens if we hit an economic downturn? What happens if post-COVID-19 we're hit with budget shortfalls? I read through the 84-page planning and public document you had. The only mention of fighting displacement you had in there mentioned one publicly funded building. I'm thinking that's probably going to be the first to go, right? And maybe, the standards are going to get loosened for who's allowed to develop here. I mean, who is going to be allowed to develop here? Is it going to be people that are, I have an answer in my mind, but who do you think it's going to be, and who's going to be when these standards get lessened and budgets get cut? In light of all these really ruinous holes in the center, I think this proposal is only going to be really approvable once it starts placing people over property and invest in autonomous tenant leadership from the bottom up, whether that's tenant unionship or other community organizations like the last person mentioned. That's the only way forward to actually build equity and engage the community in a real way. It builds power.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Meister. We appreciate you being here. And I apologize if I'm saying this wrong. Shamin House.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is pronounced Shannon, just so you know, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. This week marked the launch of the Housing Initiative Project Phoenix and sister collective Worried About Rent, WAR, which seeks to provide information, resources, and support for community members amid the steady rise in evictions, the absence of affordable housing, and the persistent gentrification of the Phoenix metropolitan area. I am speaking for these groups to make you aware of the type of people that you should be reaching out to for engagement. HIP and WAR will change conversations about housing in Phoenix, putting people before profits, and provide resources directly to community members to heal the inhumane and unjust systems perpetuated by discriminatory policies, predatory housing practices, and persistent gentrification. HIP and WAR are actively fighting against these degrading housing injustices, and this time people will come before property, spokesman Ronnie says. What that means is that each of our actions will center the most marginalized members of our communities and will be inclusive of all voices. We're not launching a project or a campaign. We're collectively and intentionally redistributing power back to our neighborhoods. HIP and WAR will connect with hardest hit communities through distribution of pertinent literature, outreach on social media, and honest discussions to provide educational resources, share organizing tools, and foster connections with other grassroots housing justice organizations. Actions will help protect community members against landlords, property management firms, legal teams, judges, constables that violate tenants' rights, while exposing that oppression of the most vulnerable is an inevitable consequence when basic needs of the community are dominated by the ruling class that would include developers. So who is HIP? We are members of the community taking initiative to support the community, while our elected officials willfully ignore and thus perpetuate the steady rise in evictions, the absence of affordable housing, and the persistent gentrification of the Phoenix metropolitan area. We center and uplift the most marginalized members of our community to shape an inclusive future for our neighborhoods. We achieve this through focusing on restorative justice, which will mitigate existing harm to promote healing and reconciliation within our communities. And by prioritizing people over profit, people over property, our conversations about housing in Phoenix will center the needs of the community rather than allowing big money corporate interests to dictate our housing options. HIP strives to assert all Phoenicians' rights to adequate shelter, amplify connections and healing within our communities, and secure safe, accessible, and affordable housing for all through advocacy and direct action. As for WAR, we aim to address the deep-rooted racial and economic segregation in Phoenix, as well as the gentrification and displacement of our ongoing housing crisis by forming intentional solidarity with our neighbors. WAR provides the organizing tools and educational resources to build on the strength and leadership that already exist in our neighborhoods if they were only listened to.
I'm sorry, the time is running. Could you please wrap up, please? I do apologize, everybody gets so much time. Could you please wrap up?
I waited 2 hours for my chance to speak. I believe that I can be heard out for another 60 seconds if you don't mind.
Sure. If you can do that, I'd appreciate it.
WAR is currently building capacity to organize Phoenix tenants. We are prioritizing reaching the people that have been deliberately targeted for eviction and excluded from decisions that will shape their housing as the moratoriums end and as this light rail expands. We expect for you to engage with us as we engage with the citizens of South Central Phoenix Corridor, and we expect to have our voices heard as you come through our neighborhoods with your money-making objectives to extract and displace us. Thank you.
Thank you. Hannah Heyman?
Chair Oliva?
Yes.
Thank you for mentioning that, and all the members of the public that are going to give public comment. Sorry that I did not emphasize that we try to keep these public comments to 2 minutes or less. I understand that the waiting time sometimes is lengthy, but public comments are limited to 2 minutes or less. So please just keep that in mind as you do your presentation.
I will, thank you. And I'll remind everybody, I do apologize. Ms. Hannah Heyman, And again, you have 2 minutes.
The city goes out of its way to bring wealthy developers and business owners into the planning and development process. But where are the people of the city? Where are the formerly incarcerated people who have to jump through hoops only to be denied housing? Where are the undocumented people who have lived here for decades in fear they will be torn from their family homes and deported? Where are the low-income people being evicted in droves by rich landlords? What about the people displaced by the light rail expansion or arrested on light rail platforms because of violent policies? Air pollution from industrial waste is killing people. Why do you refuse to talk about that? There are more heat-related deaths every year. These are victims of greedy utility companies and climate change, but also of violent city planning and development policies. Have you reached out to the families of these victims? Have you reached out to any of these residents? These are the people of South Mountain and South Central, and theirs should be the voices leading these planning meetings. These meetings are deliberately difficult to engage with, especially for the people most impacted by the decisions you make here. How many of the people in South Central and South Mountain have the time or internet access to dig through the unfriendly city website to find out when these meetings are and what they're talking about, or to find the correct email address to message when they want to make a statement on decisions that will affect their lives and their families? Have you even tried to reach out to community groups that are made up of the people in these districts and who are doing a far better job at bringing in their neighbors to have real conversations about what they need to live here? The people closest to the problems are the closest to the solutions. Any discussion that excludes the people impacted is harmful, and that's what's happening here. Any discussion that ignores the history of segregation in the city and does not surface the anti-Black racism built into the very structure of city government and development can only go on to further reinforce white supremacy. And that's what this top-down development is: white supremacy and the legacy of redlining. The city deliberately and consciously chose to oppress these communities. Ignoring that history means active participation in furthering the white supremacist project. You will not have a clear picture of life in South Mountain and South Central without doing the hard work of going to the residents and really listening to what they need. Groups like Mass Liberation Arizona, Black Lives Matter Phoenix Metro, Black Phoenix Organizing Collective, Unsheltered Phoenix, Housing Initiative Project, and Worried About Rent are made up of the people who live here, and they're doing the real work of engaging the community. If you haven't reached out to these groups to bring them into these conversations, are you really even trying?
Thank you. I appreciate your time. Rosalind Akins. Rosalind Akins.
Hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I represent Black moms and babies, South Phoenix Healthy Start. And I just want to share that Black infants are twice likely to die compared to white infants. And that's wider today than in 1850, 15 years before the end of slavery. And Black women are 3 to 4 times likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. And data show the very experience of living in America as a Black woman does something to your body that causes low birth weight for babies, maternal and infant mortality. And when you hear the word stress, we commonly think of it as we just simply need to chill. But our moms are experiencing toxic stress, which is the result of aggressions that happen to you and insults that happen to our moms and all the things that have previously been named prior to my speaking: incarceration, being criminalized and over surveillanced, and the inability to access housing. All of these issues our moms are experiencing. And I want you to also know, when your expert read in regards to the CO2 and the ozone index, that Black babies are 2 times likely to have asthma, and they're 10 times likely to die from complications of asthma. And that's a real concern in our community. And when we use words like reject displacement, how can you integrally state that that's part of your real frontline concern when you have not even considered, as I listened to your plan, to know what causes that rejection, what causes these issues? And I absolutely concur and agree with those prior to me that spoke to the issue that those closest to the answer absolutely have not been included, but they are closest to the solution. They do know the answers, and to declare that developers should be the most highly considered, I think not. People absolutely in this community that are being gentrified. I even heard the terms that it's a waste of time to talk to people, a waste of time, and this is their life. I think not. So it's money to developers, and no, you have money to designate to developers, but no money to construct affordable housing when more than 50% of those Black folk in South Phoenix cannot even afford the housing, and that's something to be considered. So I would ask that you hear the voice of the people that are impacted by COVID at this time, couch surfing, living in shelters, simply because they cannot access affordable housing. And I think the conversations that you need to have are with those that are suffering these impacts, those who are experiencing what you're talking about. Building gentrification and displacement seems to be the front line of ignoring.
Thank you. Can you wrap up, please?
Absolutely. I'm done. I'm asked that you would partner with those who know the answer.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Vanessa DiCarlo.
Charlie West, I think you skipped Hannah and Cece, number 5 and number 6.
Elias, I can't hear you very well.
Charlie West, I believe number 5, Hannah Hammond, and number 6, Cece, were skipped.
Okay. Anna Heyman, I thought I did call her. CCN.
Hi, you did hear from me. You haven't heard from Ronnie.
Okay, tell me who's next. How's that? So I thought we did talk to Hannah Heyman. Is that right? We did not? Is Hannah still on the phone? Okay, let's try CCN.
I believe that it's Ronnie.
So Rosalind, we just heard from Rosalind. Okay, and Ronnie Roland here?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, and I apologize that I don't know why I can't count right.
That's all right. Numbers are hard. Hello, my name is Ronnie Wallenzer, and I'm a community member organizing mutual aid efforts to combat food apartheid and the vicious cycle of housing violence in South Central Phoenix. The Housing Initiative Project was born out of the COVID-19 pandemic in a moment when the state essentially abandoned their community. By taking matters into our own hands and by contributing to a true community-based project, we have been able to change the material conditions of those who are most affected, our neighbors who are struggling, but we can collectively address the conditions that create such harsh imbalances in the first place. So why is mutual aid necessary? The truth is that this committee lacks community understanding. Amongst yourselves, you lack the solidarity that neighbors feel and share. Your mediocre attempts to remain equitable through this development are simply not enough to prevent people from going hungry or losing their home. The fact that the city continues to approve luxury and mixed income developments while much of the city suffers under planned food apartheid is unconscionable. The city actively planned to deprive much of the community access to food and continues to do so, all while making the city friendlier for developers and landlords. So like I said, the Housing Initiative Project was born out of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are members of the community supporting the community, while our elected officials willfully ignore the steady rise in evictions, the absence of affordable housing, and the persistent gentrification of the Phoenix metropolitan area. I'd like to make a quote now from the South Mountain Village Annual Report in 2019. The quote begins, "The City of Phoenix, in collaboration with project partners, community stakeholders, and the mayor and council appointed steering committee will develop a TOD policy plan specific to the South Central Corridor. This plan will, and I need your attention here, this plan will serve to attract, guide, and prioritize strategic investments, not community. I go on to prioritize strategic investments in infrastructure, housing, economic development, and other areas to realize a shared community vision for the future of the corridor. So I ask you now, community members, how are you prioritizing people over property? Thank you.
I apologize that I called you late. So we should be at Michelle Ponce, am I right?
That's right, Chair Lewis.
Sorry?
That's correct, Chair Lewis.
Okay, is she on the phone? Michelle Ponce? Okay, we'll come back. Vanessa DiCarlo?
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you for your patience.
Hi. Oh, yes. Thank you so much for having me. Okay. So for any chance for equity, the most important measures of success should be eviction rates, displacement, and home ownership. A priority should be in making sure that eviction rates remain the same, if not eradicating evictions. If predatory landlords and developers have license to act in the pursuit of what will almost be a guaranteed profit, this will be impossible. We'll know this by seeing who shows up around this transit-oriented development. Will the residents with deep historical ties to this area and the need for justice in the form of genuine self-determination remain, or will tech workers drop in from California to work from their new home that's only relatively cheap to them? This is why we must measure home ownership and consider who owns what, because we can't leave working tenants in the hands of greedy landlords, nor can we let Black and brown home ownership get wiped away through oncoming economic devastation that I fear could dwarf the 2008 financial crisis. Instead, let's look to the Sky Without Limits Cooperative, or the tenants that evicted their landlord, as a true vision of success. I also wanted to quickly comment on some of the language that was used. So what was discussed around targeting equitable engagement and effort, and really I heard the word effort quite a bit. And I identify effort as being synonymous with intent, but it really does lack the action and follow through in this process. When we look at input, outreach, engagement, and effort, those words are really merely performative without intentional action and inclusion through the entire process of having the people that are most directly impacted and community agreements through that entire process, not just through the very beginning. They need to be included through the entire process. The adage of, nothing about us without us, and really seeing that when we have folks that are truly the directly impacted people that can actually see each point of that process and can identify where we may lead astray with our intent when it really results in a very harmful and violent impact when those folks are not included. It would also help including them, because establishing goals, planning, and drafting with the intent that is aligned with action involving those most directly impacted will show through the involvement of people through that process, and really looking at prioritizing people being involved, those most directly impacted at every single step. I also wanted to comment on, when we talked about air quality, there was a lot talked about discussing housing prices and property, but the people and the health of the children and really what's happening with the community, I didn't hear that aside from other sources cited. That's one of the really core examples of why it is so critical to have people-centered over property. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and thank you very much.
So long. Let's go back and see Michelle Ponce. Okay, Mr. Elias, it looks like we've gone through everybody on the list. Am I correct?
No, Carolina, I believe Cece is on the phone. We were having issues on muting her, but I believe we can.
Okay, so CCN. CCN, is she on the phone still?
Let me another look at the participants. She was just there.
Where?
Let's try one more time. CCN.
Hello? It's
Yes.
not working.
Is this Cece? Hello? Is this Cece? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, hello, is this Cece? Is she, hello, can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Is it working now?
Is this Cece?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm sorry. Go ahead. It's your time.
Sorry, I was adjusting my microphone.
Oh, okay. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, steering committee members, for letting me hold this space. Several times you have reiterated that the mission of this project is to build trust with the community through communication, consistency, and accountability. I speak from Worried About Rent, an organization made up of tenants for tenants, have heard this time and time again. Developers have swooped in and made promises to bring our communities to the dinner table, but never even gave our most vulnerable to displacement, low-income renters, formerly incarcerated renters, etc., a portion of the meal. To lay out a picture of the area, 63% of the households in the corridor rent. Most of them are cost burdened by rent. This development project will touch the downtown, South Mountain, and West McDowell Justice Court precincts, areas that we have already seen high rates of eviction throughout this pandemic. Specifically in this week, we're seeing 101 evictions happening in those areas, which takes up about 10% of the total evictions happening in Maricopa County. We would like the steering committee, you all right here in this call, to engage with housing justice groups like Worried About Rent, the Housing Initiative Project, Mass Liberation, Sunrise Movement, Unsheltered Phoenix, that are actively collaborating with tenant communities and restoring the imbalance of power for the tenant class. We want you to join us in envisioning a future where there are greater protections for tenants, especially when it comes to the due process of evictions in our court systems. From our housing justice groups, we will also emphasize the need for community land trusts. Yes, you can bring development, you could bring land back to the community without involving developers at all, especially for specific areas of low-income renters within and around the corridor. We want community representation in your efforts to implementing an early warning system that supposedly identifies displacement risks in the corridor, along with, you must do this with anti-displacement policies to keep those property managers, developers on track when we do find those risks in those in those early warning systems. There are so many opportunities to bring forth the community, and we are ready to work with you on getting the most directly impacted folks a seat at the table. Thank you.
Missed you the first time. Okay, Mr. Elias, is that everybody?
That is right. Michelle, we weren't able to get her on the line, so I'll send an email to her. If she has anything she wants to pass along, I'll let you all know.
I appreciate that follow-up. Thank you. So number 7, presentation discussion regarding equitable transit-oriented development research and tools.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna try to be really professional and not cuss, but y'all did that. Seriously, watch my lips. Y'all did that, okay? I cannot, my cup runneth over. I cannot even, okay, wait. Can we just please open up our cameras and give our speakers a round of freaking applause right now for the beauty that they just spewed all over those bureaucrats? Can we please? I mean, one more amazing than the next. I cannot even handle. Can we open up our mics and share some comments about what we just heard from our community, please? And Joe, how the hell did you keep a straight face? Seriously. Ciao. I'm opening space for y'all to speak freely for a minute or two. Or drop in the chat if you don't feel comfortable.
Thank you, everybody who came on and spoke truth to power. That was so beautiful. Thank you all.
Anyone else?
When I describe like power from people and stuff, I think that it just way outdoes it. It's like knocking everything out of the ballpark. Like when I listen to you guys, I'm just like getting all amped up over here, like, damn, that was a good one. Damn, that was another good one. Holy crap. Like you guys are the shit. Everybody who spoke and everybody who's listening and feeling me, like you guys are just so great. I missed seeing you guys and hearing you guys for the last, I don't know, 2-3 weeks. Yeah, you guys are go-getters, overachievers, doers.
There are so many like audio snippets, but the whole equivalent to Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking, Mr. Vice President, like that's gonna stick with me for a minute. So good for you, good on you. I'm going to pass it to, I believe, who was going to. Well, before I do that, let me just do one more call to action. I really appreciate y'all sticking this out a little bit longer than we planned, but I just want to reiterate that. I want to make sure that you remember to take notes and that you have the intention and the action to write to Elias Valencia, and I will drop the information back in the chat again. And please make sure that you blind CC masslibaz.org so that you can have your voice heard. This is all a matter of public record. We need for it to be displayed in front of their faces. They just heard it, but we need it in black and white for them, correct? So please make sure that like our biggest ask is that we do have you email Elias, who is the person the developer, is it the property developer? Who is
the chair, the village planner for the committee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the correction. Yeah, so please just make sure that you craft your emails and you send them and let your voice be heard. I am seriously like, I'm shaking with excitement right now, so maybe I should step back and give someone else space. I do believe there was someone who was gonna close us out with some breathing exercises.
Sean is going to give us some exciting and important announcements, and then I'll close us out tonight.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for giving me just a few more minutes of tonight to talk to you all. So first, I just want to thank you again for the work of putting together this meeting and for attending and for giving those public comments and waiting everything out. It was really awesome to see how this community has come together to participate in these sorts of actions. And I'm just really excited for the future as we continue to grow and get more and more people in this type of call doing this kind of work. So unfortunately, one of our organizing partners, Drinking Gourd Farms, wasn't able to make it here today. And they work on food justice, which is an extremely important mutual aid effort that MassLib is also helping with. But this Friday, or rather next Friday, we will be dedicating our November Black Friday fundraiser to Drinking Gourd Farms, because we know Black people cannot be free unless our communities have autonomy over our food. So this Black Friday, in opposition to the capitalist invention of Black Friday itself, we're asking you to not shop on Black Friday, but to instead support Black organizers on Black Friday. Our fundraising goal for Drinking Gourd Farms is $2,000. We want to significantly aid them as they develop a collective food sovereignty practice across Phoenix fields, backyards, vacant lots, apartment balconies, and public spaces in general. So you can donate to Black Friday fundraiser November here. I think Ria probably put it in the chat. Oh, thank you, Ria. You've already did it. And you can also register to attend the fundraiser showcase through the donation link. So sort of a 2-for-1. We're gonna have 3 feature artists that we will be announcing next week. Right now it's a secret. So make sure you stay tuned on our IG mostly, but all social media will be making that announcement. And that's all I have to say. I hope that y'all have a great night, and I hope to at least see you next Friday at Black Friday fundraiser.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you all of you for sticking with us for this longer than maybe we anticipated meeting. But I think the testimony and the testament that we heard tonight was so powerful and really evidence that we need to also provide those comments in that black and white writing to the city. As we saw the disengagement from committee members, we can't let the work end in this space. So we need to get it into a place. And again, make sure you BCC Mass Live. We want to make sure that none of the comments that go to the city and none of your powerful testimonies get lost. So with that, I know a lot of us are really hyped and we're enjoying this moment of connection to kind of ground us and bring us back down. If you want to place your hand over your heart and try and check into your heartbeat a little bit. For some of you, it might be a little faster than normal. And if you want to close your eyes or cast them down. And then you're going to bring your other hand over so your thumbs touch. And relax your shoulders, your jaw. And I want you to think of one moment tonight where you felt really connected, where you felt like you were in community. I want you to take a deep breath in. And on that exhale, let all the joy and connectedness flow through you. Connecting into your heartbeat releases oxytocin, the connection hormone, and also the love chemical. And I know we get a lot of love in this space tonight. So another deep breath in. And exhale into the gratitude of the space. Hopefully you're able to check into a couple moments of power that you felt tonight, a couple moments of that testimony and connectedness and the mutual aid that this community has and how much power this community has. I think we all felt it. So with that, make sure you get your emails together. We're happy to answer any questions, as well as make sure you either register now or put it in your bookmarks for that Black Friday fund. So with that, it's been an absolute privilege to be with you in community this evening, and we will leave you to have a fantastic one.
Thank you all so much for joining us. So powerful. Have a beautiful night.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Dennis and Anisha. Bye.
Thank you for hosting this and putting this together. This was so powerful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our total pleasure. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Miss being with you in person.
Oh.
Let's stay on for a debrief.
Yeah.
Sebastian, can you hear us?
I left the meeting. I was like, oh, I'm over it now. We're no longer recording, right? Stop
You
the
did
recording.
plenty. We're still recording.
Okay, I put them in the waiting room. Oh man.
You want to stop recording too?
Oh yeah, thank you. I always forget that.